All right, this is behind the scenes for the vampire episode. We just got off the air, and we didn't come anywhere near close to finishing
No, we
our
didn't.
list. So we're going to do that for you right now. Hold on. All right, our patrons usually get our behind the scenes, but today we are live on Facebook and YouTube to finish up the radio show. We were talking about vampires and we got into some of the literary themes and ultimately got into our section where we wanted to tell you how to do this. And so the last bit of the conversation was about the agency. And Rex was making a really good point about the agency of the vampire himself and whether or not he has control over his own destiny or whether he's simply being flopped from scene to scene as the sort of the big bad, and our Slayer is the one that has all of the agency.
Good point.
Yeah.
So I think that shows you just how the more agency you give the vampire, the more scarier it can be.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
Okay.
So from a what makes a vampire scary perspective would be not only does the vampire have agency, but you don't know what the vampire is going to do. We think we know what the vampire wants, but we might not know what the vampire wants.
Exactly. And also, that's part of the destroying the vampire aspect of it comes from you trying to figure out the protagonist trying to figure out exactly what will work, what old stories actually work on.
Right. And what weapons will actually work on them as well. Right. And then two, if you create a relationship between your human protagonist and your vampire, does the human protagonist even want to kill the vampire? So there was this great storyline in the Vampire Diaries where somebody had created the cure for vampirism. They'd found the cure, right? So this idea that you could cure it, you could reverse it, you could turn this vampire who's been living for 100 years into a human with a finite lifespan. And does the vampire want that? And does the human want that for the vampire so that the two of them can be together? That's a pretty compelling storyline.
That's from Dark Shadows. They did that to Barnabas once.
Oh, nice.
And he started to age rapidly, so he went back.
Yeah, I was going to say, usually that doesn't last. The minute you realize you're not super fast and super strong, you'd be like,
all those aches and pains of old age start creaking in. You're like, forget this.
I don't want this. Let's go back to being a vampire.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question was, how does your audience view the morality of death? Is there a Christian connection there in terms of salvation and redemption, or a utilitarianism about survival? And what I mean by this is if you're writing a vampire that is unapologetically a murderer, he gets that he's a murderer, right? He's somebody that takes human life because he has to survive, and he doesn't have a sense of morality around that. Does your audience have morality around that? Or does your audience understand that that's a trade that they're willing to make?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
I'm not sure.
So you're writing about junkies, right?
Right.
Do you think your audience is going to have empathy for those junkies?
No, that's the problem. The character's deliberately written to be unlikable.
Right.
In a very real sense. I think it's part of the problem with some of my books.
And so hoping to, at some point,
just wanted to write it differently because the vampire has been done. It's been done. It's been done.
But if your audience then is reading this vampire who is irredeemable, right? Then what are they reading for? They're just waiting to see when he gets punished?
Yes.
When does he die?
Right.
Who's going to kill him?
Well, yeah. I've counterbalanced him against another vampire who doesn't drink the blood. And so they're a yin-yang type character.
In like a 12-step program?
Well, I
can be your sponsor, help you get off the blood.
You haven't read chapter 6 yet.
I've only read chapter 1.
Okay, well,
as
it turns out that this character is Jesus Christ.
Oh, even better. Jesus the vampire.
Jesus the vampire.
Jesus the vampire.
Yeah, this guy, this vampire is altered the course of human history because he drank vampire. Jesus turned him into a vampire, and that's why he came back from the dead.
So what's interesting to me about that is the question around whether or not there's a morality to this death thing. You would think if you've got a Jesus character, there must be a morality to it.
Except I made him more the historical Jesus. He doesn't, most of what's going on in the Bible didn't actually happen to him.
Okay.
I gave a very realistic. I'll send you
chapters. Historical Jesus.
I'll send you chapter 6 so you can see it. But the thing is, he doesn't realize that he's the symbol of Christianity until the 3rd century, when the Constantine converts to Christianity and he starts to learn about it. And he realizes it's him.
Huh. Look,
Then
that's
he began,
me.
yeah, that's supposed to be me because
That's great.
he came back. His followers saw him, and then he said, "Well, I'm back from the dead because of blah 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 blah. So here's what I want you to do," and then he goes and disappears.
Huh.
Right? One day I will return. Well, the thing is, he starts to believe his own hype.
Right.
And he says, "Well, gee, maybe this is it." So he gets converted to his own religion based on him.
See, that's way more compelling than the junkie stories.
Yeah, I know. I realize that now.
At some point, you like found that your secondary character was more interesting than the first character.
Yes.
Yes, I'm not surprised. This next question is: should you consider making vampirism a disease, something that's uncontrollable, something that's a weakness, or would you consider making it a superpower, something that people aspire to have? So again, the difference between your audience looking for either empathy and possibly, let me put it this way. If vampirism is a disease and it's uncontrollable, there's only two possible outcomes for the vampire. Number one, they learn to control it, like feeding on animals. Or number two, they die. They have to die, like, because they can't just continue to be murderers and we just continue to approve that and be okay with that, right?
Right.
But if this is a magical superpower that they use for good instead of evil, and you simply put up with the murdering because, like, well, it's fine because they're doing all these other really wonderful things, then we end up with like a what's that serial killer show? Dexter sort of dichotomy where you're like,
Hopefully
well,
have a better ending.
I can allow that because these good things are happening on the other side.
Right.
Would you consider vampirism? Well, in your book, in Blood Junkie, it is a disease. It's addiction.
I don't know. Yeah, it is. I guess so. It's an addiction.
Because you can demonstrate that some characters can live without being junkies over this, right? They can simply have a human existence, like people who are HIV positive that are living on a cocktail of drugs to keep them from having full-blown AIDS, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting twist on it too. That's something that people haven't really explored before. Although that's not true. The True Blood series, I guess, does that because True Blood has that they can drink this blood substitute instead of killing people.
Right.
All right. And then the very last question here, and then we're going to let you guys off the hook because this is like a pretty long behind the scenes. How does your audience receive race, classism, and xenophobia? Should your vampires be other in the sense of degenerates that deserve suffering, or should they be punished by the religious self-righteous? Is the wealthy aristocratic vampire who gets his deserved destruction at the hands of a regular Joe a commentary on socioeconomics? And what I'm interested in on this is like, at one point in the movie in Twilight, Anna Kendrick says, so I get that your zombies are like a clever take on consumerism and whatever, stop being so impressed with yourself, right? Is there a sense that this vampire myth, right, in terms of like who the vampires are, can have some kind of connection to what we see as either the upper echelon right now, as I mentioned that the baby eating thing, right?
Yeah, as long as it's not too obvious. It's got to it's got to be a good story first, like I always say.
Right.
I mean, like Samuel Goldwyn said it best. If you want to send a message, write a letter. You're here to entertain. And if there's something else comes along with it, hey, that's great. But the first thing, is it fun to read?
Right. Tell the good story first.
Right.
All right. I'm with you. This has been the vampire episode of Right on SC. And those people who listen to The Point a lot know that every time Casey gets on the radio in Kevin Cohen's spot, she likes to talk about vampires. So that was a lot of fun for me. I hope you guys learned a lot too. Next week, we'll be doing serial killers. Thank you to our patrons. To become a patron of the show, go out to patreon.com/rightonsc and give us your money. We will be so grateful. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Oh, you know what? Let's do this first.